talking about here on my channel right now. It's all about.
Good morning, and welcome to another whirlwind ride through the chaos of pop culture, celebrity drama, and the strange intersection where fame, power, and public perception collide. It's April 16th, 2026, and if there's one story dominating the conversation right now, it's the ever-evolving, increasingly messy situation between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. Only now, there's a new layer added to the drama, and that layer is Ryan Reynolds. And not just as a supportive husband standing quietly in the background, but as someone who, according to unnamed sources, is allegedly urging Blake to settle the case before things spiral even further out of control. Now, right away, we have to acknowledge something important. This entire angle hinges on anonymous sourcing. That means everything being discussed here lives in that grey area between possibility and speculation. It could be accurate, partially true, exaggerated, or completely off base. But in the world of celebrity media, perception often becomes reality long before facts ever catch up, and right now the perception being painted is fascinating. According to the reports making the rounds, Ryan Reynolds is increasingly concerned not just about Blake Lively's legal battle, but about what it could do to him. His brand, his reputation, his carefully constructed public image as the charming, witty, universally liked Hollywood figure, it's all potentially at risk if this case continues to unfold in a way that drags him deeper into it. And that fear, whether real or overstated, actually makes sense when you step back and look at the bigger picture. Because this isn't just a private dispute anymore. This is a full-blown public spectacle, one that has been building for over a year and a half during the pre-trial phase, slowly accumulating tension, narratives, and sides. Now, with the trial looming just over a month away, everything feels like it's reaching a boiling point. What makes this situation even more interesting is the subtle but noticeable shift in Ryan Reynolds' public behavior. People have started to point out that he hasn't been as vocal or visibly supportive of Blake Lively in recent weeks, especially on social media. In a world where celebrity couples often present a united front, liking posts, sharing messages, publicly backing each other, his relative silence is being interpreted by some as distance. And in Hollywood, silence doesn't just stay silent. It gets analyzed, dissected, and turned into its own narrative. Is he stepping back strategically? Is he trying to protect his own image? Or is there genuine tension behind the scenes? The truth is, no one outside their inner circle actually knows, but the speculation alone is enough to fuel headlines because here's the uncomfortable reality. Situations like this can absolutely strain even the strongest relationships. When legal battles turn public, when reputations are on the line, and when millions of people are watching and forming opinions in real time, the pressure becomes enormous. And if Ryan Reynolds truly believes that this case could damage not just Blake's image but his own, then it introduces a dynamic that goes beyond simple support. It becomes a calculation, a risk assessment. And that's where things can get complicated very quickly. Now let's talk about the legal side of this, because that's where a lot of the tension is coming from. Blake Lively's case has already taken a significant hit, with a federal judge dismissing 10 out of her 13 claims against Justin Baldoni, including the harassment claim, which, let's be honest, was one of the most serious and impactful accusations in the entire case. When something like that gets thrown out, it doesn't just weaken the legal argument, it shifts the narrative entirely. Suddenly, what may have once looked like a strong, aggressive case starts to appear shaky, and that perception matters especially when you're heading toward a jury trial. And then there's Ryan Reynolds' own involvement leading up to this point. He didn't exactly stay neutral. In fact, he reportedly went quite hard against Baldoni, even going as far as labeling him a predator in certain contexts. That's not a casual insult. That's a loaded accusation with serious implications. Words like that carry weight, especially in legal settings, and they don't just disappear once they've been said. If this case goes to trial and Ryan Reynolds is called to testify, those past statements could come back into focus in a very uncomfortable way because here's the thing about a courtroom, it's not social media. It's not a press interview. It's not a carefully crafted PR statement. It's a controlled environment where every claim needs to be backed up with evidence, and every statement can be challenged under cross-examination. So if Ryan Reynolds were to take the stand, the question wouldn't just be what he believes about Justin Baldoni, it would be what he can prove. What did Baldoni actually do? What first-hand knowledge does Ryan have? What evidence supports the characterization he's made? And if those answers aren't strong, then suddenly the confident, charismatic persona that works so well in Hollywood might not translate the same way in front of a jury. In fact, there's a real possibility that the optics could work against him. Because when you put Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively on one side, two incredibly wealthy, powerful, globally recognized celebrities, and Justin Baldoni on the other, the dynamic starts to resemble something very familiar, a classic David versus Goliath scenario. And juries, whether consciously or not, often respond to that kind of imbalance. Baldoni could be seen as the underdog, the person fighting to reclaim his reputation against a much larger and more influential force. Meanwhile, Reynolds and Lively, despite whatever claims they're making, could struggle to present themselves as victims in a way that feels convincing. And that's another critical point: wealth changes perception. It just does. When you're dealing with individuals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, it becomes significantly harder to argue that you've been financially devastated in a way that resonates with everyday people. Imagine a jury made up of regular citizens, people earning average incomes, maybe receiving modest compensation for their time, listening to claims of massive financial loss from someone who operates on an entirely different economic level. The disconnect can be hard to ignore, and that gap can influence how arguments are received, even if unintentionally. This is likely why there's such a strong push, if the reports are true, to keep certain financial details out of the courtroom. Because once those numbers become part of the narrative, they can overshadow everything else. It's no longer just about the facts of the case, it becomes about relatability, credibility, and perception. And in a trial that already carries significant public attention, those factors can be just as important as the legal arguments themselves. At the same time, the case continues to reveal deeper issues, particularly when it comes to the claims of financial damages. Blake Lively has reportedly sought substantial compensation, tying those claims to various business ventures, her product lines, her brands, her business interests. But here's where things start to get messy. According to filings and responses from Baldoni's side, there are serious questions about whether those losses can actually be linked to the alleged actions in the case. In some instances, it's been suggested that certain business struggles existed independently of any online backlash or controversy. And if that's true, it weakens the argument that those damages were directly caused by Baldoni. Even more problematic is the issue of evidence. In a legal setting, it's not enough to claim losses, you have to demonstrate them clearly, with documentation, data, and credible analysis. And from what's been discussed so far, there appear to be gaps in that area. Experts brought in to support these claims have reportedly faced criticism regarding their methodology, their conclusions, and even the sources of their information. When opposing counsel starts dismantling those arguments piece by piece, it creates an uphill battle that becomes harder to win as time goes on. And all of this feeds back into the central question: why would Ryan Reynolds want a settlement? Because when you look at the trajectory of the case, the risks are becoming more visible. A trial means exposure. It means testimony. It means cross-examination. It means every detail, personal, professional, financial, being scrutinized in a public forum. A settlement, on the other hand, offers control. It offers an exit. It allows both sides to move on without the unpredictability of a jury decision. So if Ryan Reynolds is indeed pushing for that outcome, it's not necessarily a sign of weakness, it could simply be a recognition of reality. Trials are unpredictable. Public opinion is volatile. And once things reach a certain level of intensity, even winning doesn't always feel like a victory. As this legal drama between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni continues to unfold, it's becoming less of a single story and more of a daily episodic saga, one where each new development adds another layer of complexity, contradiction, and public intrigue. What started as a dispute tied to a film project has now evolved into something much larger, touching on business credibility, public perception, and the fragile nature of celebrity branding. And while the courtroom battle looms closer, the surrounding narratives are expanding outward, pulling in unrelated but equally chaotic headlines from across the entertainment world. One of the most revealing aspects of this case has been the scrutiny of Blake Lively's business ventures. In high-profile lawsuits, especially those involving claims of significant financial damage, every revenue stream becomes fair game for examination. And in this instance, Baldoni's legal team appears to be taking full advantage of that reality. They've zeroed in on the performance of Lively's various brands, questioning not only their profitability but also whether any alleged losses can truly be attributed to the conflict at the center of the lawsuit. Take, for example, her beverage-related ventures. These brands were introduced with a certain level of expectation. After all, celebrity-backed products often rely heavily on the star's image and influence to succeed. But according to arguments raised in court filings, these businesses may not have performed strongly even before any controversy entered the picture. If a brand was already struggling, already facing challenges in the market, then tying its decline to external factors becomes a much harder sell in court. It raises an uncomfortable but unavoidable question: were these losses caused by the alleged actions of Baldoni, or were they simply the result of business decisions and market realities? And that distinction matters more than anything in a legal context. Because if causation can't be clearly established, if there's no direct, provable link between the actions being complained about and the financial harm being claimed, then the entire damages argument starts to lose its foundation. It's not enough to say, "This happened, and I lost money." The court needs to see how one directly led to the other. And from what's been discussed so far, that connection appears to be under heavy dispute. What makes this even more complicated is the role of expert witnesses. These are the individuals brought in to provide analysis, to interpret data, to offer professional opinions that support one side's claims. But when those experts themselves come under scrutiny, when their methods are questioned, their sources challenged, or their conclusions described as speculative, it doesn't just weaken their testimony, it can undermine the entire argument they're meant to support. And in a case that already seems to be dealing with credibility issues, that's a significant hurdle. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, the broader entertainment world is offering no shortage of distractions, controversies, and headline-grabbing moments. Take Kanye West, for instance, a figure who seems to exist in a constant state of public turbulence. His situation in Europe, particularly the reported cancellation or postponement of events in France, highlights a recurring theme in modern celebrity culture: the long shadow of past statements and actions. In an era where global audiences are more connected and more reactive than ever, controversies don't stay contained. They travel. They resurface. And they can have tangible consequences, like cancelled appearances or denied opportunities. What's interesting about Kanye's situation is how it reflects a broader shift in how public figures are held accountable. It's no longer just about what happens in one country or one market. A statement made years ago can resurface in a completely different context and still carry weight. And institutions, whether they're venues, governments, or event organizers, are increasingly willing to make decisions based on those past actions. It's a reminder that in today's environment, reputation isn't just a personal asset, it's a global currency, and once it's damaged, it can be incredibly difficult to restore. Then there's the situation involving Katy Perry and Ruby Rose, which introduces an entirely different kind of complexity. Allegations of misconduct, especially those tied to events that allegedly occurred many years ago, are some of the most challenging cases to navigate, both legally and publicly. On one hand, there's the seriousness of the claim itself, which demands attention and proper investigation. On the other, there's the reality of time. Memories fade, evidence becomes harder to obtain, and the context surrounding the alleged incident can become increasingly difficult to reconstruct. In this particular case, the fact that a police report has been filed adds a level of formality and seriousness that goes beyond social media accusations. It moves the situation into a legal framework, where procedures, evidence, and due process take precedence. At the same time, public reaction often doesn't wait for those processes to play out. Opinions form quickly, narratives take shape, and both sides can find themselves judged in the court of public opinion long before any official conclusions are reached, and that's where things become especially tricky. Because while it's important to take allegations seriously, it's equally important to allow for investigation and response. Jumping to conclusions, whether in support of the accuser or the accused, can create a distorted version of events that may not align with the eventual findings. It's a delicate balance, and one that's becoming increasingly difficult to maintain in a media environment driven by immediacy and engagement. Adding to the complexity are secondary accounts and witness statements, like those from individuals who were present at the time of the alleged incident. In this case, Reports that both parties may have been heavily intoxicated introduce further uncertainty. Intoxication can affect perception, memory, and behavior, making it harder to establish a clear and reliable sequence of events. It doesn't invalidate claims, but it does complicate the process of verifying them. And in a legal setting, those complications matter. At the same time, the ripple effect of such allegations can lead to additional claims emerging, sometimes from unrelated incidents, sometimes from individuals who feel encouraged to share their own experiences. Whether those claims are substantiated or not, their existence contributes to the overall narrative, shaping how the public perceives the individuals involved. It's a phenomenon that has become increasingly common in the digital age, where visibility can lead to amplification at a scale that was previously unimaginable. And just when it seems like the conversation couldn't get any more varied, it shifts again, this time into the world of reality television and politics. The announcement of a former reality TV personality entering a congressional race might have seemed unusual at one point, but in today's landscape, it feels almost expected. The lines between entertainment and politics have blurred to the point where name recognition and media presence can be just as valuable as traditional political experience. There's an argument to be made that this kind of transition reflects a desire for relatability, for representatives who feel more like everyday people rather than career politicians. But there's also a counter-argument about qualifications, expertise, and the complexities of governance. It's a debate that doesn't have a simple answer, and one that continues to evolve as more public figures make similar moves. Overlaying all of this is the ongoing conversation about wealth, power, and fairness, particularly when it comes to taxation and economic inequality. It's a topic that resonates far beyond celebrity culture, but it intersects with it in interesting ways. Because when high-profile individuals become part of these discussions, whether through their actions, their statements, or their financial disclosures, it brings abstract concepts into a more tangible form. The frustration that many people feel about economic disparity often stems from a sense that the system isn't balanced, that those with the most resources have access to advantages that aren't available to others. And while there are legitimate debates to be had about policy, implementation, and impact, the emotional core of the issue is hard to ignore. People want fairness. They want accountability. And they want to feel like the rules apply equally, regardless of status or wealth. All of these threads, celebrity disputes, legal battles, public allegations, political ambitions, economic debates, they might seem disconnected at first glance. But they're all part of the same broader ecosystem, one where visibility amplifies everything and where narratives can shift rapidly based on new information, new perspectives, or even just changing public sentiment. And that brings us back to where we started, the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni case, and the reported concerns of Ryan Reynolds. Because in many ways, this story encapsulates all of those themes. It's about reputation. It's about perception. It's about the risks that come with being in the public eye, especially when personal and professional worlds collide. If there's one thing that's clear, it's that the next phase of this situation, the trial, if it happens, won't just be a legal proceeding. It will be a spectacle, a focal point for discussions about power, credibility, and the nature of truth in a media-saturated world. And whether it ends in a courtroom verdict or a behind-the-scenes settlement, the impact will extend far beyond the individuals directly involved, because in today's culture, stories like this don't just end. They evolve, they echo, and they leave lasting impressions on careers, on audiences, and on the ever-changing landscape of public discourse.